Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Can-Am Missing Project, copyrighted edition for a video channel. Skinwalker Ranch, the review episode. And I gotta tell you, I should be polite. One of the sleepier episodes I've ever seen, and a couple things I was disappointed at, and I will get to that. Travis started off the program by saying that the last 4 years have been pretty challenging. I would agree. Not from a lack of effort on their part, that's for sure. Now I know I've gotten a lot of complaints from people who comment about Skinwalker Ranch, how it's all staged and it's crap and blah blah blah. Then why are you here? Why are you even wasting your time commenting? Because I don't think that's true. Why don't I think that's true? Because I've known the people that were working there. Sorry, I know for a fact it's not. And you can think what you want, but the ranch is a real entity. And they were going to start today by doing a new drilling operation. They said that they've pulled things out from what's on the outside of the space shuttle, similar metallic kind of things. And the drilling operations are going to start. And I thought, why doesn't Travis attempt communicating? They have this 1.6 gigahertz transmission coming, sounds like from the Mesa and even from the Triangle and maybe even from the homes. But what's the purpose of the 1.6? Some people have said, well, maybe this entity is trying to communicate. Well, let's try. Now, I always try to think outside the box. A couple years ago, I saw this thing on this real expensive website for like toys for boys who have money. And what it was a giant blow-up screen that you could put in your backyard, and you could show movies on this thing and have all your friends lay on the grass and watch this giant movie. It was a big screen, maybe 15 by, or 20 by 15, something like that. And I thought, okay, why not put that thing right out there in the middle of the Mesa? Sounds kind of stupid, doesn't it? Well, my stupidity gets deeper. And at the same time that you put this on, maybe show photos of your team, some kind of, I would probably look to a communications expert to see what kind of message you could send through just figures. And I don't mean people, but let's say that they did some kind of animation work to show what they were nice people and they were trying to understand, and simultaneously transmit at a 1.6 gigahertz level. Just start off transmitting an SOS, because that replicated transmission, see if you get a replicated response from 1.6. That's why I would start. May not get anywhere, but they're not getting anywhere now trying to communicate. So they met with a couple of Native Americans. Now, it's not that I don't believe the Native Americans have had these, but to me it seemed like filler in this episode. And here's why. Because I think you could go into any ranch within 10 miles of Skinwalker Ranch, and you could find witnesses that could tell you things like they heard from the natives. Now, hearing that the ranch is cursed, it's evil, you don't talk about it, they're told to keep it to themselves, and the ridge is a path for the Skinwalker. Grandmother told one of the guys that Skinwalkers use the ranch. One of the guys said that he'd seen some type of creature crawl on all fours like a low crawl across the road. and that they had seen fluorescent lights on the highway sometime in July 2013. Blue, green, purple lights, kind of like orbs, came toward them, made one guy nauseous and a headache. So this nauseousness and a headache, I find this part interesting because I have been in areas doing research on various things, UFOs, Bigfoot, let's say, and I've come out of there nauseous and with a headache, and it's only the next day that I feel normal. In fact, the biggest headache I ever had in my whole life was researching, and I went to bed. And I when I was younger, I used to get migraines a lot. This was worse than the worst migraine I've had. And I've had migraines before when I've thrown up. This headache was so bad that if I could have driven myself to the hospital, I would have, but I couldn't. And I was on the road. I was staying in a hotel room. Nobody was with me. I was working with a guy who lived in the next city over, and it was horrible. It was, again, doing this research. So, headache and nausea, I believe the guy. And then the Trappist talked about on the ranch, they've had health issues, obviously, where one of the guys had a big lump on the back of his head, lots of headaches, dizziness, blackouts. So, I'm sorry, but this was really stupid. They start snaking the giant boulders. That is not stupid. They should be doing that. But do you remember last year, I think it was, or the year before, they put some red flares inside those boulders? You remember that? And when they're snaking the boulders, they see a boulder that has red stuff all over it. That's the place, I think, that they were doing the red flares. If I do believe. I may be wrong. Just thinking. Then they brought in a guy named David Mason. And he brought in some real interesting technology. And I did a little research on Mr. Mason. Here's what it says. Dave Mason's interest in the UFO phenomena began at age 13 when he built his first magnetic field device to detect UFOs using a compass and phototransistor. At age 17, he wanted to detect unknown objects, so he designed a sensitive optical circuit and installed it into binoculars, which enabled listening to pulsing light. At age 22, he was an electronic engineer at NYE Viking, a ham radio product manufacturer. For the past 27 years, David has been a co-owner and co-founder of an advanced electronic test and measurement equipment, custom engineering, and supply corporation. Spanning more than 3 decades, he has engineered electronic devices used in production as well as prototypes in industrial and government contracts. Remember, Travis said that he had worked with this guy? So I'm sure that David has built things for Travis when he's worked for the government. He volunteers at Bellevue College, where he provides technical maintenance, calibration, and the operation of the Astronomical Observatory. He continues to develop new technologies for research of the UFO-UAP phenomena, as well as other technological developments. David's recent movie project, A Terror in the Sky, is a scientific expedition in search of UAP in Southern California, where he was a science team member acquiring data using readings and analytical devices. So that was David Mason. Very interesting. Now, did I think that what he brought was important? I think it could have been. I don't think they used it right. Not that I'm not blaming Travis in the least. But they have a rocket going up in the air. They have another thing exploding in the sky like fireworks. And then it's a little bit unclear, but David's device was going and hitting this entity in the triangle simultaneously? I don't know. It was a little unclear. Now, why not just have David's device pointed right at that entity and let it go for 30 minutes and see what happens? instead of all this other visual stuff going on at the same time. It almost appeared to me that like the rocket and this exploding fireworks over here, it's almost meant to be a visual stimulation for the episode. I don't know. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I didn't really understand all that. I definitely liked David's idea of using ultraviolet and the 3 levels of spectrum that they were shooting. And as is typical, they had 2 rocket failures. The first 2 that they tried to launch failed. Pretty typical at the ranch. And as I've learned, rockets failing is not that abnormal. But then one went off, and they caught it on a camera, and I give that to them. They see this purple, they called it purple, it looked blue on TV, flashing light out there on the floor of the ranch. Not sure really what you could make of that. 4th rocket launch went okay. Purple flash again. Thomas saw it, but the camera also saw it and picked it up. Now, I'll be polite. Travis and others said that they saw this UAP in the sky that was flashing. To me, in my humble opinion, just looked like a helicopter out there with the strobe transmitting. I've never known a UFO to flash like that, like an airplane. There's no reason for a UFO, a true UFO, to flash like that. Just saying. I put really zero interest in that. And they said that was a big deal. They have the UAP flashing in the sky. And they have Thomas's flashing on the ground. The ground one was interesting to me. In the sky, 0. They never got 1.6 gigahertz signal after they launched the 4th rocket. This is the shortest amount of notes I've had this season on any episode. Again, being a producer on a show like this, hey, I have been. If you watch the movie or the special show I did for History Channel through Prometheus, which is the production company on Skinwalker Ranch, if you go onto Amazon and you look up Vanished Dave Paulides, I was the executive producer on that. And I can tell you that if you don't have the ability to lay out a storyline and then follow it, like we did in Vanished, we controlled the storyline. We'd go to Mount Shasta, we'd be at 1,000 feet, then we'd be at 4,000 feet, then we'd be at 10,000 feet, then we'd be at 13,000 feet. And then this is what we do at the different elevations. And if you don't have a crew that's in really good shape, you're going to have problems. We had some problems with people who had altitude sickness. Now, that's part of the gig. But when you're working with something that you can't control, this entity, it's very hard to predict every week that the content is going to be very valuable. In the movies I've made, Missing 411, The UFO Connection, a documentary, we're not really based on any urgency. I mean, we'd like to get it done quickly. That thing took us 3 years. 3 years because of COVID and other multitude of things, Ben dying. But I have a lot of sympathy for what they're trying to do at the ranch, because they really have no idea how things will respond. And if there's no response, there's really no show. Just like they said, the entity wasn't responding at 1.6. And the best they could do were these 2 kind of UAPs. And then they bring the Native Americans on. And again, hey, I'm a big Native American supporter. I'm a huge Native American supporter. I think their viewpoint is important. But were those messages that were brought that important? I think that should have been laid out 3 years ago when the show, 4 years ago when the show started. It really didn't have a place where we are today. Now, one of the things I would do if I were the producers, I'd have a town hall meeting right there in the big town next to the Skinwalker Ranch. And I'd have a giant map up of the entire area. And I would have Travis, Thomas, and the gang sitting at the head of the room. And I'd say, we're interested in stories about unusual things that have happened to you and your family, especially if you've lived here for generations, like many of the Native Americans have. I'm interested in those stories. And then I'd map them. Just like we do the cluster maps. Now, why they haven't done that? Again, I think that's something that should have been done in the first or second season. But when they get a show like this, where they're having a tough time pulling up important content, this would be a thing they could do on the spur of the moment, and they probably should do. I'd also send some producers out into the field and talk to some area ranchers one-on-one and ask them if they've had mutilated cattle. And I wouldn't ask the ranchers to go on camera, but again, I would have a map of the area and I would plot where these ranchers have had mutilated livestock, not just cows, livestock. And this is important. I'm big on maps. I've always been big on maps. And the original NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery of Sciences, that was on this ranch before it was purchased for this episode, or the last 3 or 4 years since Brandon bought it, they were very interested in my maps. And I told you that the person who was the head of the entire research team that was on the ranch asked for 6 copies of my cluster map to give to their scientists. So that's how I got the in to begin with, and I started talking to them on a regular basis. And that's why I know that I just know that they're super credible people. So this is going to be pretty short. I'm going to end this pretty soon here. But going back to what I would do, I would test the water coming out of that mesa area. They still haven't done that. Try to communicate. Bring some communication experts. And I don't mean oral communication. Communication via animation. See if you could stimulate something other than a constant 1.6 gigahertz message. See if you could get something that made sense, that was inconsistent, or like an SOS is consistent. Broadcast it, that SOS message. See what happens. I would also probably bring in David again, the guy they had here today, and just shoot those 3 different lights at the entity and just keep it going. Unless there's some kind of cost associated with keeping it going, I just let it go. And what about maybe shooting those lights in an SOS, boom, 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 succession, and see what happens? I don't know. I see that they're drilling again next week, and they're having problems. They can't get through it, which is something that's plagued them for a while. I think that they've kind of dorked around with this mesa long enough. I think they either need to bring in some massive tractors or give up and walk away from that. But they've played that angle of it long enough. If it was me, I'd bring in 4 or 5 of the biggest tractors there are and just start moving that mountain. You got to start sometime, and it may take a few weeks to get there, but so what? Do it. Stop talking about it. And I admire Brandon and Travis for what they're doing, because they're on ground that's nobody's ever been successful on. So I admire the effort that they're on. Stay with us. I've posted a video every day for the last 4 days, so please watch them. Take care. Paulides out.